Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a very, very warm welcome to the virtual Boeing 737 training event. It's great to finally get started, Petter, isn't it? Welcome.
Thank you very much, Ben. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this for quite a while now. We had such a blast last time we did this, so and I know that it's just going to get more fun this time. So I'm really looking forward to this.
Absolutely, absolutely. We've got a load to look forward to over the coming days. We're going to transform your knowledge from where it is now into knowing far more about the 737 than you would ever normally get. You'd have to be on a type rating to kind of get the level of knowledge that you're going to be gaining over the next few days. Not only are you going to be learning what to do, but you're also going to be learning the why. Why do we do the things that we do? And there's going to be so many little benefits to this that are going to enhance your understanding of the 737 and enable you to set it up and fly as realistically as you possibly could.
I think that's a very good point to point out here. That the reason we're doing this is that we really want you guys to get the most out of your simulator experience. And even if you're out there and you are not doing this because you want to be better simulator pilots at home, you will still learn a lot of behind the scenes stuff, because we will be telling you about our personal anecdotes, things that have happened to us. And just like Ben pointed out, why do we move a switch? Right? You can learn anywhere that a switch needs to be moved, but you won't know why unless you have someone with a little bit of experience that can tell you why. So that's what we're going to do in this course. Those of you guys that are joining now from Mentour now, I have not announced this to anyone. It's just here popping up in your feeds. But this is a virtual training event. So it's me, my colleague Ben, which is also an experienced type rating instructor and examiner. And we're going to go through some really cool stuff about what and how we operate 737.
Absolutely. We've got a lot to look forward to over the coming days. And I've got to say, we've had the Facebook group open, the private Facebook group. And if you haven't got access to that yet, you can register by clicking the link in my bio on Instagram or going to the link in the comments, the virtual737course.com. And there you can register, and you're going to get access to the private Facebook group. You're going to get all the early access to workbooks, ebooks, and all the bonus bits and bobs as well. So definitely worth signing up to get the full experience. But it has been amazing to see so many of you in the private Facebook group from every corner of the globe, every walk of life, but kind of all united by this love of aviation. And it's been, I've been sitting there over the last few days, just going through the posts and seeing all the introductions, and it's been amazing, absolutely incredible.
We know that it's a great community out there, and that's what we're here for. Hopefully, to make it even greater.
Absolutely. And this is what this is all about. This community we've already created here is all about positivity, learning. And as I said, we've got a lot to look forward to. And, not only is this great community, it's a great place to ask questions. So as we go through this course, what I hope will happen is it will generate a lot of questions. And that's going to be one of the real benefits of what we're going to be doing, because if you don't understand something, which is perfectly normal, even when we're training real type rating cadets, there's a heap of questions. You can ask questions. Now, we might not answer it immediately, but guarantee we will see it. We will capture it. And every day from the next few days, I will be live at 2:00 local time UK, where I will do a Q&A session where I will take the questions that you've asked and I can delve deeper. We can really get into the nitty gritty of whatever that question may be. We'll have the sim up and running. I can demonstrate deep dive into tech systems. So please do ask. There is no such thing as a silly question, because I guarantee if you're thinking it or wondering about that, somebody else here will be as well. And we all get to benefit from it. So please do ask.
Absolutely. And I want to really emphasize this, that there's going to be people here that are 12 years old, and there's going to be people here that are 65 years old or even older than that that's going to want to see this. So if you have a genuine question and you want to learn, this is the time to do it. This is the time to ask these questions. And Ben will most likely cover most of them on the Q&A sessions that will come following the day. But that's how we want you to learn. Like you think now, you write down your questions, and then we answer them.
Absolutely. And that's, I'm kind of committing my days now to making sure you get the most out of it. And if you can't make any sessions live, do not worry. They're all going to be available for you to watch back at your leisure. So even if you want to ask a question, I'll answer it, and you can't make it to the Q&A, you'll be able to watch the Q&A back, which is another good reason to sign up and register and get into the Facebook group, because you'll have access to all of that. Now, before we jump in, Petter, and start getting into this, shall we do a bit of an introduction? Everyone knows Mental Pilot, the YouTube legend, but who's the man behind? Who's the man behind the legends? Tell us.
So my name is Petter Hörnfeldt. I have been flying professionally since 2001. So it's a good 22, 23 years now. I'm Swedish. I have 2 little boys, 1 wife, 2 dogs that you might have seen in some of my early YouTube videos. And I am a type rating examiner, type rating instructor on the Boeing 737. So, and like Ben said, I am also running a couple of YouTube channels on the side.
Just a few. Now, yeah, very similar to Petter. My name's Ben. Some of you may know me as Airline Pilot Performance on Instagram. Now, very similar, flying professionally again from 2001. Started off as a flying instructor. Did that for a few years, based down at Biggin Hill. Started flying the 737-300 then for KLM UK out of London Stansted. But after the events of September the 11th, it wasn't making KLM any money, so they sold it, and my current employer bought it, transferred over to the 737-800, and I've been flying there, I think, since 2004, 2005. Also a line training captain like Petter, type rating instructor, type rating examiner. And that's kind of through that lens that you're going to be learning. Between Petter and I, we have a combined commercial aviation experience of, blimey, what is it, 46-ish years, which is frightening, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't want to think about it.
But yeah, you're gonna be able to. That's what we're here to share with you. You know, that combined almost 50 years of commercial experience, most of which is on the 737. You know, we both fly the NG, we've both flown the Max. So there's a lot of experience here. So please, get involved. Do ask. Amazing. So without further ado, what do you reckon, Petter? So should we set the scene? So the first thing we're going to do over these course of 4 days, you're going to be learning, we're going to be going through these, continuing these kind of setting up of a flight effectively. So where we are at the moment is we're in London Stansted. The aircraft is what we call cold and dark. So it's completely shut down. Nothing there really at all. And that's generally how we will find the aircraft. So when we get on board, I was flying a few days ago, first thing in the morning, open up the aircraft, get on board. It is literally cold and dark. I open the flight deck door, and this is the wonderful view that greets me when we open that door. Now, your job and our job now is to take it from this shut down piece of machinery into an aircraft that's ready for flight. Yeah. And that's what we're going to do today. So Petter, as you got coffee in a hand, you're ready for your day ahead. And, as you open the door here, what is your thought? What are we checking maybe before we start flicking switches? Are you thinking about anything in particular?
So what I do personally when I get in, first of all, as you walk out to the aircraft, you want to have like an overview of the aircraft. And this is something that people often forget, that it tells you a lot about what's happening. Just having an overview. Is there personnel attending? Is there engineers working around the aircraft? Is there the fueler there, for example? That's often very interesting from an operational standpoint. Yeah. But just having an overview of the aircraft as you're walking out is super important, because it's going to give you situational awareness about, what is about to happen. Where are you in the process? But once you get into the cockpit, before you start flicking any switches, you want to make sure that you know what the technical status of your aircraft is. So the very first thing that I tend to do is I take the tech log out, which tends to be behind the captain's seat. Depending on airlines, it can be in a different place. But it's generally a big book that contains all of the technical data of the aircraft, including the logs of the last couple of flights. So I'll take that out. I will check if there's anything in what we call the HEAL, the hold item list, where the engineers will write down anything that is open, any malfunction that might be open, any system that is not working the way it should, but it's still legal to depart with. So I have to make sure that I know that, because it's super important to know, for example, if the APU is not working, because that might be your next step. You want to get some AC power connected, but if the APU is enough, you don't want to put that switch on. Obviously, there should be an INOP sticker on it as well. But you'd have a look on that. And then I also look through the last couple of flights. Yeah. Open up to see where the aircraft is coming from, for example, because that can have an effect on what kind of security check that my flight attendants, my colleagues, are going to do. So if it's coming from outside of the EU, for example, they need to do a more thorough security check than a security search rather than a normal check. So I'll do that, go back a couple of days to see if there's anything that's been reoccurring. Maybe people have had problems with something, and it hasn't gotten into the heel yet. So technical log.
Yeah. So we get the technical log, and as Petter said, as we walk up to the aircraft, it can really give you a good overview of what the aircraft condition is, because when you're on board, you might miss the big picture stuff. So let's say there was some of the gear suspension, the oleo, had deflated or was not compressed enough. You'd see as you walk up to the aircraft, it looks slightly lopsided, but you might miss that if you're actually not paying attention and just get on board the aircraft. So as Petter said, it's really good to take a general overview of your aircraft for that day. How's it looking? So we get on board the aircraft, we check the tech log, we check the overall condition of the aircraft, as Petter said, and now we're in a position where we're going to start getting the aircraft powered up. We're going to start sort of putting some life into the airplane. And one thing that I'm sure pretty much all of you are aware of, and will certainly be more aware of as we go through the next few days, is that in flying, we love our acronyms. We love shortening lots and lots of words into one, smaller word. So there's a million of them. We can't get airborne without acronyms. And the first thing, and they help guide us, they come out of the manual and we kind of put them into an order that makes them sensible. Now, the very first thing we need to do is to get some power on the aircraft. Now, there's two types of power. You have your battery power, and then you'll have your main, what we call AC power, which can come from engines, APU, or ground power. And that's generally what the aircraft will run on. But we need the battery on, and that supplies the majority of the vital systems. So if we lost all of the aircraft power in flight, we'd still have enough to be able to fly the aircraft in a basic mode. So we're going to do, if you've got your workbooks there, you'll see that in there. We affectionately call it the Bell check. So BELL. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come up to the electrical panel. Now, if you're anything like me, let's send that off. If you're anything like me, the first time when I was doing my type rating and I saw the flight deck, I was like, my goodness, this looks complicated. But hopefully what you'll see as we go through the days now is that actually there's a good order to it. It's nowhere near as complex as it looks. And if you don't already do so. So this is the electrical panel. And as you can see up here, we have the main battery switch. If you fly a light aircraft, you'll be known as the master switch effectively. And we're going to basically just close this plastic cover, and that will turn the switch on for us. And you'll see the aircraft suddenly come alive. It will supply battery power to a lot of the systems, and you'll see the lights come on, you'll see the whirring, and suddenly the aircraft wakes up. So we're going to do this Bell check. So battery is going to go on. There we go. We get a little bit of power on the aircraft and she starts to look a little bit more alive. The next one is E, which is the electric hydraulic pumps. Now, this is your hydraulic panel just here, and these control the pressure going out to various systems. And we have two main hydraulic systems, System A and System B. And for a bit of redundancy, we have two types of pumps. We have an engine-driven pump, which is literally driven by the engine spinning, and we have an electric motor pump as well, which will power it if the engine isn't running. Now, as you can see, the engine pumps are on. We leave those on, but there's no engines aren't running, so they're not actually supplying any kind of hydraulic pressure. But the electric pumps, you can see, are actually toggled back and off. And we need to make sure they are off. So we're checking that the electric hydraulic pumps are off at this stage. And Peter, what's the implication there? If they weren't off, what's worst case scenario?
So at the moment, they are obviously AC driven. So by switching the battery on, the electric hydraulic pumps are still not running, right? But if they were on instead of off, there is a possibility once we connect an AC power source that they obviously will then start to power the hydraulic system. And that can start moving things, both inside of the main wheel well bay, where there's a lot of hydraulic equipment, but also, crucially, the nose wheel. So we tend to, at this point, as you can see out to the window there to the left, there's a tug car standing there. And there is a high likelihood that someone is down there by the nose wheel, maybe connecting a tow bar to the nose wheel. Sometimes when we park and the nose wheel is not completely straight, maybe it's a little bit at an angle. And if someone down there connects the tow bar, and then we suddenly switch on the hydraulics or switch on AC power and the hydraulic pumps are on, that will straighten the nose wheel immediately. and effectively turn that tow bar into a giant bat, right? So if anyone is standing next to that, they will have their legs cut off. So we're doing this as a precaution to make sure that we're protecting people that might be working around the aircraft effectively.
Yeah, correct. It's just another safety measure. There's lots of sort of protocols in place to prevent that from happening, and this is just one of them. So we go, battery is on now, electric hydraulic pumps are off. The next one for L of the bell checks is the landing gear, and we're checking that that is down, which might sound like a strange thing to check because we're on the ground. You know, we've seen the wheels are down. We've just got on the aircraft. But again, Peter, what are we checking? What's the purpose of checking that this lever is down? You know, why might it not be down?
Yeah, so there are actually, we do quite a lot of maintenance procedures during the night, and some of them might actually involve rigging the aircraft up, standing it up on stilts effectively, and retracting landing gear for doing various maintenance functions. So there are, as with many things here that was pointed out, for example, by the Helios disaster, there are things that maintenance might do during the night that we have to make sure is being undone before we start operating the aircraft. So making sure that landing gear is actually in the down position is one of those. It very rarely is anywhere else. I've never in my 23 years seen it be anything else than down, but it's there, and we do it as a redundant check, basically.
Yeah, and I think if you look around, there has been, some issues where nose gears have been, accidentally been raised on the ground. It gets very embarrassing, very costly, and we certainly don't want to be the cause of that. So we just check that it's down. So batteries on, the electric hydraulic pumps are off, the landing gear lever's down. So the last L is what we call, maybe slightly strangely, the ship's library. Now, it's not a place really where you go and rent books, but it's somewhere that we would, it sounds very grand, but it's not. It's more like a little hole down here that would normally keep the documents of the aircraft on board. A lot of it is electronic now, but we would check things like the certificate of airworthiness, the certificate of insurance, its airworthiness certificate, and so there's various certificates we have to check that are on board the aircraft to make it legal. So we would check the ship's library. So now what you can see, we've got power on the aircraft. We know that it's safe now to bring more power on the aircraft and turn hydraulic pumps on. And this is now where we can, if we have ground power, we can now get the full power on the aircraft. It's now safe to do so. So you can see here, this is the electrical panel. If I zoom in, you can see this little blue light on here that says ground power available. That's, if you ever see an aircraft outside your gate, you'll see there's like a little umbilical cord plugged into the side of the aircraft under the FO's window that is basically just ready to supply power to the aircraft when we in the front select it to on. And obviously we now know it's safe to do that because as soon as we turn the AC power on, potentially things are getting powered up. Hydraulics could get powered and so on if we weren't careful. So now we're going to bring that power on. Now, if you don't have this light available, how can we get AC power on, Peter? What would we do if this light, because this light isn't always on, we might not have ground power to get AC power on.
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, if the ground power is not available, if you're on a remote stand, for example, maybe the ground crew hasn't started up the ground power unit, it can be many reasons for it. We still have the auxiliary power unit, the APU, available to us. Yeah. So that is a possibility, and the APU can be battery started. So as long as we have some juice in the battery, there will be enough power to start up the APU. However, we don't really want to do that before we've checked, for example, the fire extinguishers to making sure that the fire system is working. So ground power is what it's our go-to, and it's also the environmentally friendly thing to do.
Correct. So that's what we're going to do. So you mentioned now the fire. So that's what we're now going to do. So we've got a system on board, obviously, that not only can put out a fire, but obviously monitors all of the various systems for fire as well, or overheats. So before we can starting APUs or engines or anything like that, we need to know that it is indeed safe to start them. And if we did get a fire or any kind of overheat situation, we have all of the protections and extinguishers available for us to A, alert us to that, but then B, to enable us to put it out and extinguish it if it did happen. So we're going to run through a fire check now. Now, the fire panel is down here. These are your thrust levers, and the fire panel is down here. And maybe if I show you in a better view here, if I just come down, you can see here the fire panel is kind of just down in this area down here. So what we're going to do is we've got a little test switch that tests a number of systems down here in the left-hand corner. And it's a two-way switch. We can either hold it to the left or we can hold it to the right. and we will hold it to both, but we'll start on the left. And on the left, you can see it says fault in op. And what that's going to do is do basically a self-test of all the monitoring systems and all the fault systems that monitor these to make sure that, in fact, if we did get a fault in the fire detection or protection system, we as pilots would be alerted to that fault. And it's not some hidden fault there we don't know about. And it's going to illuminate a certain amount of lights. So if I just come back out, because we're not sitting down in the flight deck yet. So again, if you refer to your workbook, if you've got it there, when we move this switch to the left, we're looking for 5 lights. That's the easy way of remembering it. So we're looking for 5 lights to light up, and they're going to be shown up here on what we call the master caution and the system enunciator panel, and also down in the fire panel. So we're going to hold it to the left first of all, and we're going to want to count 5 lights. So
before you do that, Ben, I just want to point out that for those of you who are watching this from Mentour now as a live and have not signed up to the course, Ben is referring to the workbook quite a lot here. And what we have basically is that we've been, over the last week or so, we've been talking about doing this course, this training event. And anyone who has signed up to this training event, there's a link to it here in the video description as well. When anyone who has signed up has gotten a workbook that you can use to follow through what we're talking about. So this is what we're talking quite fast, because you can actually read what's about to happen, and we are just explaining it. So if you're watching this on Mentour now, just sign up and you will get this workbook sent out to you, because we're going to continue doing this for the rest of the next 4 days.
Yeah, it's all completely free. It's yours to keep. And, as we just kind of mentioned, when you're following along with this, if you do have your own home 737 sim, whether it's Zebo or PMDG or whatever it might be, you can either sit here with your sim set up, watching us in real time, going through it, or just watch it, enjoy it. And then you can always play it back, pause it when you need to, refer to the workbook. And then if you have questions, you can ask.
Sorry. Yeah. So you were talking about lights there, Ben.
Yeah, so we're going to check for 5 lights. So we're going to go back down here, and we're going to move the switch to the left. In real life, we hold it, and we're going to press the button, and we're looking for 5 lights. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lights, if you can see that. So we're looking at the master caution system, which alerts us to a fault. We get an overheat warning up here. If I just do that again, there'll be an overheat warning. And down here, if I just zoom back down so you can see it better, if I just hold it again, you'll see it alerts us to a fault, or that the APU fire detection system is inoperative. So that's your 5 lights that we're looking for. If we've got more than that or less than that, something's probably gone wrong. We get the engineers out and we'll get it fixed, or change aircraft, or whatever may happen at that point. All right, the next one. So we know the fault system's working properly. What we now need to do is make sure that if we did get a fire or an overheat or some kind of issue there, that we would be alerted to it correctly. So we knew exactly when a problem happens. So what we're going to do now is move that same switch to the right, and that's going to effectively simulate fires, overheats, and we're in every system. So in other words, it simulates a really, really bad day, and we're going to check that all of the systems are working properly. And if we do it with ground power on, which we have, we should see now 11 lights. So we're going to get a fire bell and a red fire warning and master caution on both sides. They're replicated on both sides. Again, the overheat detect. And then we're going to get the red fire lights, the overheat lights, wheel well lights, and it's going to be 11. So, and you also get you check the fire bell. So we're going to go on to that now, and we're going to move it across. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lights. And if we then come down here, with 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and we're looking for 11 when we get the ground power on, which we can put. Why do we get 10 and not 11 Petter there if we haven't got the ground power on yet?
That's a tricky one. So for example, the wheel well fire warning needs AC power available. So it's the only system that requires AC power to run, and therefore we need AC power. So this is what Ben is doing now, is what we need to do in case we need to start the APU. But if you're following the workbook there, you'd actually put the ground power on before, and if it does that now, we'll see how it looks.
Yeah, so we were talking about the APU and how we would start. So this is what we would do first. You count 10, but when we put the ground power on now, you'll see the full system is now powered up. And now if we do that fault again, you'll see that the little wheel well will count them again. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it's going to stop, but I'll go back. 5, and then we've got 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So now with the APU now, the AC power now on the aircraft, we get the full protection and alerting system. So we know it's good. We've got 5 and 11. the last thing we need to check in the fire panel, if I come a little bit closer so you can see a little bit clearer, is we need to be able to make sure that if we did get the fire, that we can now extinguish them. Now the engines and the APU have their own extinguishers that we can discharge should a fire occur. And they're discharged using what we call squibs, which are basically got a fire compressed fire bottle, which has got the halon in it. And then it's all under pressure with quite a high pressure. And if we want to use it, there's a little explosive charge that basically blows a seal and allows that extinguishant to flow to the relevant engine or APU. And we're just checking the circuitry to that squib. Now, if you look down here, you can see there's 3 green lights, one for each engine and one for the auxiliary power unit. And there's 2 separate systems for each one for a bit of redundancy, like we always have. And we're going to move it to the left and the right. And we're just basically checking that 3 green lights come up. That just checks the circuitry to say that if we did need to extinguish, we can do it. So we're going to move it across here. So we've got 3 lights, 1, 2, 3. So we know that that side of the system is working. And then it will move it to the right-hand side. Again, 1, 2, 3. We know the circuitry in both redundant systems are now fully operational. And now, obviously, it would be time now to start the APU if you didn't have ground power. But we've now got the ground power on, which is good.
So people in the chat are thinking that we might have pre-recorded this and it's not live. It is very much live, but we will be saving most of the questions for the roundup later on, just because there's a lot of things we need to go through and it's going to take a lot of time otherwise. Now, one question that I can straighten out immediately is that when we say AC power, we're referring to alternating current, not aircraft. So AC and DC power is what we're referring to.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, and just to re-emphasize what Petter said, we've got well over 1,000 people watching live here with us today. You know, and like I said, questions are a big part of what we're doing, and I want to make sure we answer them. But if we were here answering all of the questions, we'd keep you here until tomorrow. So please do ask them, and I will make sure that we go through them. And tomorrow at 2 o'clock UK time, we will be then going into, and I'll deep dive into these questions for you. So please do ask. And if we don't see a response now, we're not ignoring you. We're just carrying on with this, and we will answer them in tomorrow's session before the next live training session.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, so now that we've got the aircraft safe, we've got the main power on, we've checked the fire, we're now going to go into another bit of a flow. Now, one thing I'm going to note here is, and this is, I know, very true for cadets, because we train in cadets in the sim all the time and type rating courses. They get the manual, which is a bit like what you've got, but obviously on a bigger scale for the whole system. And when you first look at it, it can look really daunting because a lot of these are done, we're all doing this from memory. We don't refer to a book as we do this in the aircraft. And if you're trying to recall it from the manual, it looks horrendous. There's no way I'm going to remember this. But rather than teaching it from memory, what we do is we teach them to learn a flow. You'll see that the way that it's set out in the manuals is actually a very, very organized flow. So what you're going to be learning here is that the flow that we use. And the next one is a first example of this. So now that we've got the aircraft safe, we now need to make sure it's safe for passengers to come on board. And one of those is the first thing is to turn the emergency exit lights to armed. So, those of you that travel in the cabin, you'll know that there's floor path marking lighting that will guide passengers to the nearest emergency exit, that the exits light up. We need to make sure that that's working before we start boarding. So if we did have, in the very unlikely event we ever needed to evacuate, we know that even if during the boarding process, all the lights will be working and ready to go. So we're now going to go and move this switch here to push it down, and that will move it to armed. You can see at the moment it says not armed. So we literally flick that down, and now that is armed. So if there's any loss of AC power, then when we shut the aircraft down and we evacuate, all the lights will automatically come on. The next thing we do is, you can see down here we have an attend button. That is for the cabin crew. So if we ever need to contact the cabin crew, we would press this button, it would go ding dong in the cabin, put a light on, and it alerts them that we need to speak to them. So we'll have the flight deck door open behind us at this point, and we just press it to make sure it's working. So when we press that, we're looking for a very faint, a very, very, very faint ding dong. In real life, it's actually fairly loud. Then we move down, so we're starting up, and you can see we're flowing down. Now the next thing we're coming down to is the thrust levers, and what we're going to do here is check a safety system on the aircraft that pretty much all aircraft have, and this is something that we really emphasize since the Spanair crash back in 2008 in Madrid. And it prevents us, this system that we're about to check, prevents us from advancing the thrust levers for takeoff with an incorrect flap setting set. Because if we do have no flap set and we're expecting to have them potentially. We're just not going to get airborne, and it's going to result in a very bad ending. So to prevent that from happening, we have what's called a takeoff configuration warning. So as we advance the thrust levers towards the takeoff thrust, if certain parameters are not where they need to be for takeoff, such as stab trim, flaps, and a few other bits, it's going to alert with a noise. So we just want to check, because the aircraft certainly isn't configured for takeoff yet. The flaps are up and everything. So we're just checking that when we advance that, we're going to get a noise. So I'm going to bring the thrust levers forward now. There we go. You can hear that beep, beep, beep. That's telling us that there is the aircraft is not configured for takeoff. And we'd also get the red lights up here, which says takeoff configuration. So we're just checking that. So we're doing that flow. We're coming down. We just bring it all the way forward, all the way back. Do we get the noise? Great. And
that, by the way, the takeoff configuration red light is one of the things that came out of the Helios accident, because that sound sounds exactly the same as the cabin altitude warning. So those two warnings sound identical, which is one of the mistakes that the poor pilot did on that flight. He thought it was actually a cabin warning. Sorry, he thought it was a takeoff warning, but it was actually a cabin warning. So he started going back to see if the circuit breaker could be pulled, which was not a good idea. So one of the things that Boeing did was to put that red light in front of the pilots.
Yeah, because if we lost cabin pressure, we'd get the exact same noise. So it's just a way in the surprise and start of the event. It just, again, will show you takeoff config or cabin altitude, depending on what the problem was. All right, excellent. So now we're going to keep going down. Now, probably the easiest way, if I just zoom in here, we're going to keep coming down and backwards in this flow. We've now got the fire panel, but we have another fire panel, which is the cargo fire detection and protection panel here. And this is monitoring the forward and aft cargo holds for smoke. And we need to check that all of the systems are working properly. And this is a slightly simpler. We're just checking that these are in the normal position. Nothing's lit up, and we're going to press and hold the test button, and we're just making sure that the lights come on. We get the red fire lights, but importantly, this light here doesn't light up, which says fault, which first thing in the morning when the aircraft's cold, it doesn't like waking up, does it? You'll sometimes find that does come on or doesn't come on, whichever way it works. Not come on.
Well, what I find is either of them don't light up when you do this test, so you think that it's actually a fault with them. And they do that for just enough time so that you call out engineering, so that when engineering actually comes out and look at it, and you say, look, it doesn't work. You press it again, and it works perfectly. Yeah. That's my experience of that system.
Yeah. So you might be kind of setting it up, and the FO go, oh no, it's not working, grounded. Yeah. Okay, it might not be. Let's just pause it for a bit. We'll come back to it in a moment. And it is part of a checklist, so we couldn't forget it. And sure, normally 9 times out of 10, you try again. Once it's all time to boot up and warm up, it works. So we're going to press this again. We're going to get the fire bell. We're going to get the lights. So we're going to press and hold it. There you go. And there's no fault light coming up, which is good. And we let go. So now we know that the cargo, as they're starting to load bags, and if there was anything smoking in there, we would be alerted for it and could manage the situation. All right, we come back. And down here, it's not plugged in on this aircraft, but we actually have a microphone for the public address system where we do the welcome PAs, but also from a safety perspective, if we ever needed to give, instructions to the passengers and the cabin crew through the PA system, we need to make sure it's working. So we just pick it up, test, 1, 2, 3, make sure you can hear it in the cabin and make sure that's working. Then we come down. There's a curious little door in the floor here, which is normally covered in grime and something you really don't want to be touching. What's hidden underneath here, Petter?
So that's the manual release handles for the landing gear. So this door is it's pretty peculiar for the 737. Like Ben is saying, it's very dirty. People step on it. First officer steps on it all the time when it's walking or she's walking and getting into the seat. But there's a micro switch in that door.
Yeah.
So, and that micro switch is connected to the actual functioning of the normal retraction and extension function of the landing gear. So when you open that door, you disable the normal extension and retraction. And of course, it's a micro switch. So if that micro switch is not working properly, if the door is not properly closed, for example, then you might just notice that when you try to retract the gear off the takeoff. So it's really important to verify that that door is properly closed, which you normally do by just stomping on it a couple of times.
Yeah, just to show you in there. That's kind of very true to life what it does look like in there. Grimy, grotty. You can see that a little micro switch is easy to get a bit gummed up. particularly if the engineers have been opening it a bit.
I love how they made it really dirty inside of it. Just very realistic.
It's very, really, yeah. Normally there's crumbs and all sorts. So yeah, to close it up, we're making sure that it's properly tread on it, make sure the micro switch is closed. So when we do come to raise the landing gear after takeoff, it's going to come up. All right, so that's the first little flow that we've spoken about. Now, the next flow that we're going to do, before we haven't even sat down yet, the next flow that we're going to do is what we affectionately call the rainbow scan. And that's simply because it's kind of shaped in a rainbow. And what that's effectively going to do is start behind the FOC. And we're going to go into what it is, checking all the way along here, and then working our way in like a rainbow shape all the way across the aft overhead panel here, checking a few things, and then coming all the way down and ending behind the captain's seat here. So that's the rainbow scan. You can follow along in your manuals there. So if I change view, because you can't really lean forward, just to show you what is here, we have lots of what look like switches and buttons. What are these, Pelle?
These are circuit breakers. Yeah. So they are connected to each of the systems. What you're looking at now is the P6 panel, which is behind the first officer. The easiest way to remember, there are two panels. There's P6 and P18. And P6 is behind. The lowest number is behind the first officer.
Yeah.
So, but basically every single system in the aircraft, in the 737 that is connected to these circuit breaker panels in one way or another. And the way they work is that when they pop, which means that something is wrong with the system, they pop out, literally. Yeah. And they have a little white collar connected to it. So the best way of checking this is to stand just next to it, parallel with it, and basically look very closely from down to up. And if one of them stands out and shows that little white color, then in that case, something has popped, and it's worth getting engineering there to check why. Now, some of these circuit breakers are popped by design because some systems are not activated in the aircraft, for example, and some are just highlighted because we need to be able to find them quickly. One is the the takeoff configuration warning circuit breaker. Which is there, and that's given a yellow color so that we can see that quickly to make sure that that one is not popped if we do that takeoff config check and it doesn't sound for a reason, you know. So you look at this very, very carefully. Nothing should be popped unless it has a color on it, and if it's not, then great. It's great beginning of the day. And we also check the fire extinguisher to make sure that that's in the green area, generally speaking.
Yeah, and actually, there was an incident online where there's a bit like like a grenade. There's a safety pin in here to stop you accidentally compressing it in flight, and that had come out, and the crew had not spotted it. And I think when the FO went back, put his chair back or something like that, it was twisted, it basically pushed the handle down a little bit in flight, and they heard a hissing, like a shh. And as you know, Peter, in the sim, when we simulate rapid decompressions, that's the kind of sound that it gives. And that's kind of that's what they linked it to. And they thought they were suffering a leak and it was going to decompress. So the crew actually initiated an emergency descent. And in the investigation later, found out that simply that had been compressed slightly and was leaking.
To be fair, the one thing that will happen when you do extinguish that is that you will remove all the oxygen from the cockpit. So it's not wrong.
It's good to have your masks on.
It's good to get your masks on for sure. But it's I'd love to send me that final report. Then that sounds.
I will. Watch out for video.
I haven't heard that one.
Yeah, watch out for video there, guys. So
I'm about video.
You heard it here first. So we work our way up. Now we're continuing this rainbow scan. So again, there's a logic to the way the manual is laid out. So spare bulbs sounds kind of mundane. It's literally what it says on the it is. It's literally what it says on the tin, isn't it? What bulbs are they for, Peter? Why?
So the 737 is an ancient aircraft. There's no going around. It's a 60s technology aircraft, and it uses these halogen bulbs behind each one of these little buttons that you see. Behind each one of those, there is actually two bulbs, because one can go out and you'd still get the warning then, right? So, and they burn out from time to time. And it's one of the few maintenance actions that is entrusted to us pilots to do, is that you can pull these buttons. If one of the lights goes out, you can take out the button, and you take out that spare bulbs thing, which is like a little tray with many different spare bulbs of many different sizes, and then you just change them. And you just remember to tell engineering afterwards that you've used them so they can fill it up. The thing though is that you have to be very careful with that one, because if it's not latched correctly, you see that the top there's a little black button, and if that is not latched properly, so it's kind of someone has put it in but it hasn't clicked in, then it can fall down, and what's below it? The circuit breaker panel.
Yeah.
So what can happen, and we all know that if something can happen, it will happen. It can fall down and it can pull out the circuit breaker, which can cause a malfunction of any system really on that panel. So it's really important to make sure that that's clicked in properly.
Yeah, properly clipped in there. Then we come across here and we've got the emergency escape rope. It has to be a pretty bad day for us to actually start warranting that we need to use that. But if we open that, we're going to find the emergency escape rope. And what are you checking in there, Peter, when you're opening that?
Yeah, so this is a little bit funny, and the fact that we have to do this every day, but you reach in and you check that the emergency escape rope that's rolled around in there is actually connected to the structure, because like Ben is saying, this is hopefully never going to be used. We would only use it if we can't use the normal emergency exits in case of an evacuation. Maybe there's a lot of smoke or something in the cabin, we might have to jump out using our cockpit windows. And in that case, what you do is you open the window, you take out the emergency exit rope, you put it down, and then we climb out. Hopefully, if we're nimble enough at our age to do that. But you have to check that it's connected, because if it's not, you just throw it out the window and it just falls down, and it's not good for anyone. So you have to check that, and we check that on every first flight of the day. And it should be mentioned as well that this scan that we're doing this setup from a cold and dark cockpit. So a lot of these checks are only done once per day. We don't do them during the turnaround. We do them when we do this at the first flight of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is all something we do once for that particular day. So we've now checked that, if we did need to use it, is attached. It's not just going to come falling out with us. And now we're going to come up here and we're going to do a few tests. So we've got up here the Mach airspeed warning and we have the stall warning test. And these are going to simulate both an overspeed. So in other words, if the aircraft flew too quickly, how it would alert us with what we call the clacker. And also it will simulate stalling the aircraft where the wing angle of attack gets too high and it can no longer generate lift. So we need to make sure that, again, that both of these systems, there's more than one system, that both of them are working. So, and it's great when kids come in and they want to see the flight deck on the ground. You might get them to press that and tell them you've got machine guns on board or something like that. They get eyes like this when they actually press the button.
I'm a little bit more evil than you. I let them do the takeoff config test, and when that warning comes, they almost brown down their pants.
Yeah, that is mean. But one person, they said, no, not really machine guns. Yeah, genuinely machine guns. And it's why, in case we see a competitor airline, and then they pressed the button, and they genuinely jumped as they did it. They looked really concerned out the front of the aircraft to see what they just destroyed, and I had to kind of explain. But yeah, so. Machine guns, Mach airspeed warning. We're just going to press one at a time. We're going to check that we get what we call the clacker. So here we go. 1. That's 1. And 2. And these are the real machine guns, which is what we call the stick shaker. So these down here in front of the control columns, if you can see, we have a little device. And what that does, if we were to stall the aircraft or nearly stall the aircraft, it literally vibrates that control column super loudly, super quickly to alert us that we're about to stall the aeroplane by basically shaking a weight down there to make it really vibrate. And we're going to check that both of those, one, the captains and then the FO. So we're going to go, machine gun, and you can see it shaking. That's the 2 stall warning. So we know that those systems are fully working. The next one we've got to be a bit careful with. We're going to check the flight recorder. Why do we need to be careful?
So this is funny as well. Remember, we tend to do this very early in the morning. It's cold outside. We haven't really got the coffee kicking in yet. So you get up here, and most of this you do by routine. I mean, we've taken 45 minutes almost to get to this point. But normally you would do this within the first 5-10 minutes of entering the cockpit. And as you can see, there's a guard next to the flight recorder. So on the flight recorder, there's a guarded switch, which is black, and you have an off light next to it, which is telling us that the flight recorder is not working at the moment. Okay. The problem is that just below it to the left, you'll have another black guarded switch, which is the passenger oxygen. Now, you have to make really clear that when you're moving the flight recorder switch and you want to test this, that you don't accidentally do it on the passenger oxygen. Because if you do, you're going to release the rubber jungle down the back. All of the emergency oxygen masks are going to fall out, and you are going to be not only severely delayed, you're also going to have a couple of engineers hating you for the rest of your career, who's having to reset all of those. So that's also why there is a little, if you look closely on the passenger oxygen, there's actually a little wire attached to it. That's not a wire that will hold it shut, but it will definitely make you think, hopefully, before you pull it out. So what you do is you open up the flight recorder guard, you put it over to test. That should make the light go out. And then when you put it back down again, the light should come back on again, and it should trigger a master caution overhead warning down there. That way, you know that the system is working. It's done self-test.
Yeah, and I do take a lot of care. When I was flying the other day, and first flight of the day, I do really just pause, at 4 a.m, and go, right, flight recorder, because it has happened. People have done this, and it's not a great way to start your day. Good. Then we come across with this rainbow scan. We're just checking the lights are out, that the electronic engine controls are all guarded and on. Now we have our crew oxygen. The passenger oxygen is normal. So if we have, in other words, if we do decompress in flight above 14,000 feet, it will automatically deploy. And crew oxygen. So we have our own oxygen on board the aircraft, which we can use if we ever need it. We're just checking that the pressure is above dispatch requirements, and that will be dependent on the airline and how many crew are in the flight deck and so on. But as a general rule of thumb, first flight of the day with 2 crew, very conservatively, if you've got more than 1,100 pounds per square inch of pressure, you're good to go. Anything less than that, you might start looking it up in the books. And that's very airline dependent as well. Yeah. But we're looking here, we've got plenty.
I looked through, last time I looked through the manual, I think with 4 people in the cockpit and the highest possible temperature outside, it was still better. Like you could get away with 10. Yeah. Yeah. So something around there, but you would very rarely see it that low.
No, very rarely. So we're just checking that the pressure is good. We've also got, if you notice, 3 green gear indicator lights. So the main ones are here, which to 3 greens is good. It tells you our gear is down and locked. But in case one of the sensors on one of the gears on the main sensors don't work or fail in flight, we also have a secondary set of indicators, which are completely separate, powered separately, and so on. Because on the 300, we usually have to have a little viewing glass. So underneath here, we actually had another little flap where we could look down into the nose wheel well. We check some lines are all lined up to see if the gear is down and locked. And one of us would have to go down to the cabin, pull up the carpet, where there's another little spy hole. You can imagine the passengers' faces if you had to do that. So to avoid that,
it's all right. It's all right. We're just going to have a little look.
Not spying down on the floor. But yeah, to get rid of that and to bring it slightly more up to date, we've got now a secondary set of gear sensors that avoid us having to do all of that. So again, we're checking that these are green.
And just to make it absolutely clear, any green light is a green light. Right.
Correct.
So if you have it out on one and you have a green on the other, then you're fine.
We're good to go. Good. We've got the main light in here, which will light up if we need it. If it was dark, we would have it. Now we're coming across here now to a major part of the aircraft systems, which is what we call the IRSs, the inertial reference system, which is kind of the heart and soul of the instruments that we use to fly. And what we're going to do now is we're going to bring those to life. And we can go into more detail about how these works in a Q&A if people would like to know a little bit more about how they work. But they're great bits of kit, very clever, use things like ring laser gyros, accelerometers. They sense the rotation of the Earth and gravity, and they know exactly which way's up, which way's down, and then we can then use that. Because if you look at our instrument displays, there's nothing usable on there that we can use to fly an aircraft. So what we need to do now is we need to align the gyros and also enable navigation mode. So we've got 2 of them. For redundancy, again, we're going to rotate these through the align position. So it will begin the alignment process and put them into navigation mode. And that's going to start the whole process. It does take some time. So we're going to go, you can see it does a little self-test. So it can be powered by DC and it can be powered by the main system as well. So it does a backup of the on DC, so telling you that it can get power from the backup. And now you can see it's going into the align mode, which can take generally 7 or 8 minutes in kind of Northern Europe, can take longer elsewhere. And then we do the same on number 2. So on DC, align. And if you want to know how long it takes, actually, you can. If I turn the brightness up, if this works, once it gets some power, if I just go on here, there we go. Actually, you can see it'll give you a countdown. So if you move it to heading and status, you can see it says 9 minutes. So based on its current calculation, it's going to take 9 minutes to get all of the information it needs to give us some attitude data. Good. So now we come across, we've got the leading edge devices. So these are the leading edge slaps and flaps on the wing. We're just checking that you press a little test button, just checking all the lights are lighting up. So if we ever had a problem with our leading edge slaps and flaps as we retract them or extend them, we just know that the lights will come on. So you can see they all light up, and that would enable us to try, work out what's gone wrong. And then we repeat this kind of process. The emergency escape rope, if you don't like the captain, you can actually untie that. So when he jumps out, he'll just fall down with the rope. Don't do that. Come down here.
That's why I always find mine disconnected. But I do.
Yeah, I'm always having to retie them. Again, checking the circuit breakers exactly as Petter said before, and checking that. And we put our flight case down here, and we also check that we've got a few things like our visors. You can see in here that these are basically sunshades that we can clip up onto these rails, when we're flying, to stop the sun, shining in our eyes and so on.
Very high tech.
Very, very high tech indeed. Now we've kind of got the aircraft ready. We can now finally sit in our seats. The whole time for this, we've actually been standing up doing this from behind the pilot seats. We're now actually going to go and sit down. So we'd move the seat back, and it kind of when we move the seat back, it goes, you can see the markers on the floor. It goes back and then towards the outboard side of the aircraft to make sure this space is nice and big. We'd move forward, and then we're going to kind of come and sit down in the aircraft so that we are now, getting everything ready. And we're going to go through kind of another acronym, if you like, and it's taken from the manuals. And it doesn't float me. It's a strange sound. It's like a sound more than a word, but we call it the SLEO way checks. And if you've got your manual, you can follow through what that means. So the first thing we're going to do of the SLEO way checks is the S, which is seats. Now, these seats, they're A, very expensive, and B, can be, moved in pretty much any which way you like. So you can get it as comfortable as you wish. And everyone has quite different, I notice, seating positions. We train the ideal Boeing position when we do the type rating, how it should be, but they can move forwards, backs, up, down. You've got lumbar supports, you've got go up and down, out and back, you've got thigh supports. Ultimately, we get it into a position. Is there anything you use, Petter, to kind of get yourself into the same position? Because if your seat's in the wrong position, it's horrible, isn't it?
Yeah. No, it's one of the most common reasons why people cannot land the aircraft properly is because they're sitting the incorrect way. So the way that I do it is I put the armrest down on the seat first, and I align the front of the armrest with the coffee cup holder. You see the coffee cup holder down there?
Yeah.
So I do. I put the armrest down on the right side, in this case, on the captain's seat. Put it forward to the front of the armrest, just aligns with that coffee cup holder. Then I know that in the distance is. You see there? Yeah, perfect. So the distance is more or less where it should be from the pedals. Then I adjust the pedals so that I can sit properly. There's a little crank in front of the yoke there, which moves the pedals forward and backwards, depending on how long legs you have. And then I adjust it in height-wise so that I can properly see both screens, and I can just kind of see the top part of the windshield. Right, so I don't look down onto the windshield, but I can kind of notice it's just like skimming. My view is just skimming the top of the windshield. So when I do that, I will be able to see both screens properly, and I'm sitting close enough to the rudder pedals, and I know. And if I sit it like that every time, it means that every landing and every rotation is going to feel the same. Right, so it's super important that you find the correct way of sitting and that you maintain that. On the Airbus, you actually have a setting for it. So every pilot has its own setting, and they just put in like 125 or whatever. Yeah. And the seat will like into position every single time. But of course, we're Boeing, so we're analog. It's more like an old Volvo 240 than a new Volvo. So it's a little bit more of a craft to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's it is super important. So when you guys have got yourself seated in here, try and get it kind of something like this, where you can see all of your instruments, you can kind of see your wiper, you can see all of these along here, and everything's in easy reach. And as Petter said, when we're training cadets, if they are not, their manual handling's not great, often you look at their seats and they'll be too low or too far away, and that can make a big difference. So that's a good place. So seats. L is the next thing. Lights. We're going to do a light test now. So you can see on the forward panel here, we've got the light test, and we're going to move this up. And this is a great thing again if people come into the flight deck, because it lights every single light on the overhead panel all around the aircraft on full up.
Except except the wheel well fire warning.
Except the wheel well fire warning. Well, very good. So if I just come back to show you, so as they walk in, you can see that every single light is now on. It looks amazing, particularly at night, because it goes to full bright. It's literally like a Christmas tree. And what are you checking, Pat? Once we've done this, what are you looking to do? What are we looking for?
Yeah, it's interesting because when cadets do this in the simulator, they've read that they're doing a light check. So they switch on the light check and they just look at it. And they just they think that the check is just admiring the beauty of it all, but it's not. Right? What you're looking at, what Ben started saying about scan flows is actually applicable here. So there is a scan flow structure to how we work in the cockpit. And when we do a light check, a light test, you follow that scan flow structure, which is on the overhead panel left from up to down. And then you're going towards the right, up to down. And what you're looking at is that every single one of these lights are actually illuminated. And they're not just partially illuminated, because you can see that one of the bulbs is out, for example. You see the light, it's on, but it's kind of dimmer on one side of it.
Yeah.
If you see that, then it means that you're down to one redundant bulb and you need to change it. Okay. Yeah. So that's kind of what you're looking for, because if you do this and you have bursted both bulbs inside of one of the lights, for example, and then that warning illuminates in flight, obviously you won't see it.
Nope.
Right? You might get a master caution warning, but when you look up in the overhead panel, you won't see what the master caution warning is actually referring to. So this is a really, really important check to do. So you go through, once you've gone through the overhead panel, then you go on the mode control panel from left to right. You do the same. And then you follow a flow from the front of the cockpit all the way back through the center pedestal until you get to the very back, right? So that is the scan flow structure of the Boeing 737 cockpit, which you will be using when you do the final flight deck preparation later on, or when we do the final flight deck preparation. You'll see that we follow this scan flow structure, and it's a way that Boeing has kind of made all of these scan flows, so it's easy for us to remember. It's really hard to learn them, but once you've learned them, they'll be there forever.
Yeah.
So that's the point.
Exactly right. Just a quick look up here, just to see how long have we got. I just want to see for the IRSs, how are we doing? So you can see there's 1 minute left for the IRSs. So when we come back down here, you'll see in a moment, sorry if I just move that around gently, all of these, once it's fully aligned, and we will have to put some information in a moment. So we'll do that in a moment. But anyway, yeah, so the lights, we've got it on bright. At nighttime, we have them on dim, and it just stops it kind of glaring in our eyes. And we just then also just set all of our lighting down here. So you've got your display units. So you've got the outboard display unit, inboard display unit, the lower display unit, upper display. You can change all the brightness of that. You see that's all the way off, all the way up. The main panel, that does the panel behind here. All of these are backlit. So you can kind of change the brightness of that. Background light for the here, and you've also got the AFDS lights as well. So you can set all the lights how you would like them. More important during the nighttime than daytime, to be honest. All right, so we've done the seats, lights. The next one is the ident. Okay, so now we're going to jump into the FMC, and you can see, sure enough, the very first page when the aircraft boots up is the identification page. And we're going to check a few things here, and we're going to do a few things. So what are you checking, Peter? When you come down here, what are you looking at? So
mainly, I'm looking through it, making sure that the aircraft is the same aircraft. It's especially important if you're flying Maxes and NGs, just to remind yourself what kind of aircraft you're into. But it's the active nav database that I'm mostly interested in. Yeah. Because that database you have to have in date.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not. And then you need to either tell engineering to upload it, but most of the time you just have to change over to a new active one.
Yeah. So in this case, we get the engineers to make sure that it's uploaded. It does happen occasionally that it'll be slightly out, the thrust rating and so on. And you can see now that we've got a little message come up here, enter IRS position. And that means that the IRSs now have done their alignment, but they need one more bit of data before they can start showing information on here. So we go down here, and we can then, at this point, if you have this, we can now into the position initialization page, and we can now give it its last piece of information that it needs. So if you wanted to, you could put the airport that we're in, which is Echo Golf Sierra Sierra. You don't need to. But you see these, what we call box prompts. Whenever you see the box prompts rather than the dashes, that's mandatory information. That's information that the aircraft needs in order for us to progress to the next step. So it says set IRS position. Now, you can see there's different pages here. We're on page 1 of 3. So if you come down and go to next page, you can see here that we have various positions. Now, the GPS is already up and running. So the GPS knows where we are on planet Earth. So what we can do, the IRS is now, they've done their alignment, they've spun the gyros up, they've got everything, they know which way's up, which way's down effectively, but now they need to know exactly where they are on planet Earth, and they need us to do that. So what we do is the little button next to it's called a line select key. So if we press the button next to one of the GPSs, say left, that will then bring this data down into what we call the scratch pad. So it basically brings it down here. Now, if we go back to page 1, so previous page, and then put the line select key adjacent to this box prompts, when I put that in, the IRS will go, right, I know exactly where I am, and now it can start giving information. So when I pop that in, watch what happens. All of a sudden now, we have attitude, we have heading, we have angular bank, we have the whole works ready to go. Good. So that's the so seats, lights, ident. We've done all of that. The next one now is oxygen. Okay, so we've checked the oxygen amount. We now need to check that we can use it. So this is slightly different to the one we have on board our aircraft. But what do you do, Petter, with yours?
I put it on and relax for a while.
Yeah.
Get myself some good oxygen in the morning.
It's good with the caffeine. Yeah.
Yeah, no, so you have to make sure that it's properly stowed, and then there is a push to test function on it.
Yeah.
Which you can use where you have there's a selector normally on the mask where you can go to emergency, or it can be on diluted demand normal. And what you put it to, you try it first on normal and you push the test, and it should just be a momentarily release of oxygen. And then you switch it over to emergency and you push down the button again, and then you get a continuous flow. And what you do is you hold it down for maybe 5 seconds or so, and making sure that that doesn't just die off, because if it does, then maybe there's a valve that has been closed down by the oxygen bottle. And you also check on the overhead panel that the crew oxygen doesn't drop a lot when you do so, which is another sign that because once again, what we're doing here is making sure that all of the emergency equipment is ready for us in case we need it. And what we don't want to be is at 39,000 feet, we get a cabin altitude warning, we put our masks on, and then we realize that the engineers have just changed the bottle but forgot to open the switch down below us. So this is why we're doing this test.
Good. Exactly right. So we're looking for the little yellow cross that comes up, the hiss. We can check our intercom and make sure that that's all working as it should do. And now we're happy that it is. So with seats, lights, ident, we've done oxygen, window now. So we just check that the window is closed and latched. We can also check that it opens. So we literally would just squeeze this trigger, rotate the handle kind of back like clockwise and backwards here. And the window basically comes in and then slides down here and back. And what we're checking there is really that it latches back, because if we need to close it again, and I can't show you on here, to close it, there's a little latch that we have to pull to unlock it from its position. And you might go, well, why is it locked? And that's simply because if we have an emergency landing, say the nose wheel collapses, the aircraft is nose down, if we need to evacuate out of this window, that window is heavy. And gravity would just want to slide it all the way forward here. So to prevent that from happening, we need to check that it's locked open. And then to unlock it, we just pull the little latch forward. We can push it forward and then close it in, and then the window is locked. So we're just checking that that's working. So the next thing is seats, lights, ident, oxygen, windows, ATIS, Automatic Terminal Information Service, another acronym. Basically, it's a fancy name for the airport weather. So if the FO was here now, they might do it, or if not, I would be doing it. And we would type in the frequency for the ATIS, which we get on our chart. And that would then give us an automated weather report that is updated every half hour. In the UK, every 20 minutes past the hour and 10 minutes to the hour, we put it on and we'd listen to it and we put it on speaker. I don't think it's going to work here in Stansted. And it would then give us the weather, and we take the weather down. It gives quite important information: wind direction, temperatures, pressures, and information we're going to use for our takeoff performance and calculations and so on, which we're going to go into more later. So we get the ATIS, and once we've got the ATIS, we can set our EFIS control panel, EFIS, Electronic Flight Information System. This is called our EFIS panel, and this is what enables the pilots. You can see there's one on each side, one for the FO, one for the captain, and it enables us to put pretty much anything we need or want on here in either of the displays. So we can put in things like the QNH, which is the pressure setting at sea level, which is generally in the UK or in Europe in hectopascals. In the States, it might be inches of mercury. So we change this and it changes to inches of mercury. And we can change that. And you can see it changes your altitude depending on what it is. And that's altimetry. It's a big topic, but we can certainly have a talk on that in a Q&A. We can also set things if we've got an idea and a preliminary, what we call MFRA, minimum flat retraction altitude. Peter, when would we use that? Why is that important?
So the minimum flat retraction altitude is used primarily for single engine operations. Yep. So it's the lowest altitude of where we can start retracting our flaps after an engine failure, which tends in most cases to be about 1,000 feet above the aerodrome level. But it can differ depending on terrain and things like that. So we have to check that with our performance software, generally speaking. But in Stansted, it's what, 1,350.
48, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we generally set a preliminary one if we don't know, because we won't have done our takeoff performance yet, but we would set a preliminary one of Stansted is 348 feet above sea level, so we would set 1,348. And if it was different during our takeoff performance, we would check it and we would re-change it at that point. We might want to change a few other things on here, so it's very blank on here at the moment. Yep. So we would, have things such as airports. We can display airports on here. We might have terrain. We might have VORs. We can set the range. This is 10 miles, so 5 and 10. We can change it to whatever range. Generally, I get airborne with 10. And you can set whatever you need. So you just set your EFIS control panel up based on the ATIS. Okay, right. We've done the EFIS control panel. Now we've done that, we're going to start going to this flow that Petter also mentioned a moment ago. And I'm just going to change my view here just so you get a better view of the flow, because in the manual, it looks like a lot of things to do. But as we said, we're just going to follow a flow, and we're going to start up on the top left, and we're just going to literally flow our hands down and forward. And we're just going to, so we're sitting in the chair. These are our flight control switches to make sure our flight controls are powered, making sure all those are on. Same with the spoilers, no other lights on. Yaw damper, we're going to put that on at this point. That light will go out, and that's something to prevent Dutch roll. Again, we can go into that. And navigation and display panels. These allow us to set different inputs for our displays or navigation systems in the event of a loss of a system. But for normal ops, we're making sure that they're all in the middle position. So they're all in normal. They can go left, right, and they're making sure they're all in normal. So you can set both on 2. There you go. So we're making sure that they're both in and that the source is all on auto. We then flow down. We're going to put the pumps on that have fuel. Now our fuel is down here. We've got 6 tons of fuel at the moment, nothing in the center tank. So we leave the center pumps off, and we're going to check what we call the cross feed valve. Peter, what are you looking for when you open this?
Yeah, so once again, we're talking about a very old type Boeing system here, where if you open it, I'm expecting the bulb to go bright blue, and then once it has opened, once the valve has actually moved into the open position, it should go dim blue.
Yeah.
And then I want to close it, and it should go bright blue and out.
Good. So the dim blue, exactly right, tells you that the valve switch, the switch itself is in agreement with the actual valve, which is down in kind of like near the wheel well bay. And then the bright blue basically means there's a disagreement between your switch and the actual valve. So we've closed it. Bright blue, it's not quite in agreement yet. And once that valve closes, now the light is out and we're good. And what that does is separate the left side and the right side of the fuel manifold system, which we'd use for fuel balancing, which we'll cover in another topic. Good. So now we come back up here. We do this flow. We just check the electrical panel. We might have, say, the battery. We're looking just to make sure we've got 24 volts. We might have the ground power on here to make sure we've got 400 hertz, 115 volts. The cabin utility and the IFE switches. So this is things that power, such as the ovens, water heaters, any in-flight entertainment for the passengers, making sure that's on.
Coffee maker.
Coffee maker, big one for the morning. Got to get the coffee maker heated up. Standby power, making sure that's latched closed. Again, we've got the ground power on at this point, and then we come down and the APU is not on at this point. That's fine. We come back up. You've got your brightness for the panel, which we've got set here. Equipment cooling is in the normal mode. Emergency exit lights armed. Seatbelt signs. Now, when do we put the seatbelt signs on, Petter, at this stage? Because we're boarding now, maybe.
Yeah. Generally speaking, when we're boarding, if we're fueling and boarding, the passengers are not allowed to put their seatbelts on because we might need to evacuate quickly of a fuel leak, for example. Yeah. So when the fueling is completed, when we see that the fuel truck has actually disconnected the fuel hose, then we switch on the seatbelt sign.
Yeah. So that's now, the fueling is now complete. So the seatbelt sign is on. We're going to come back up and we've got the window heat. So now we're going to turn the window heats on, and that's going to heat this the side and the forward windows, apart from the very aft number 3 windows. So we're going to turn these on, and that's going to put the green lights on, telling you that the power is being supplied, and that's going to start warming up those windows, which works for a number of reasons. Obviously, it stops them fogging up because we're going into very cold, moist conditions initially, potentially. It also makes them stronger and more able to accept a bird strike. You know, if we hit a bird at 250, 300 miles an hour, then it's a lot of energy. If the window is cold, it could be brittle. But if they're warm, they've got a little bit of softness to them, which can just help prevent them from cracking. So there's a number of reasons why we need the window heat. So we're just checking they go on. The probe heat, we leave in auto. That heats the pitot probes and the airspeed sensors and the angle of attack sensors outside of the aircraft. And we will turn those generally on once the engine starts, unless it was in freezing conditions and snowing, etc. Anti-icing, wing anti-ice, engine anti-ice, that we're not flying, we don't need that on at this point, so that's fine. Now we come down to these electric hydraulic pumps. Now we need to start bringing hydraulic power onto the aircraft. So before we do that, as Petter said, it's really important that we are aware. We've got to use our situation awareness to ensure that the ground crew below us are in a position that it's safe for us to do this in case one of the procedures has not been followed, the old Swiss cheese model. You know, if a number of people have forgotten their steps, this last step that we check could prevent someone getting seriously injured. So, you know, generally, if it's one of us out here, maybe Petter was doing the walk around, he might bang on the side of the aircraft and just give me a thumbs up to say that the bypass pin is installed in the nose wheel. And that means that even with the hydraulic pumps on, there's no pressure going to the nose wheel steering. So even if we put the pump on and the nose isn't straight, it's not going to suddenly swing straight with 3,000 PSI of pressure. Or we might look out the window, speak to the ground crew, just to ensure that it's safe to put it on. So we're going to have a little look, and just to show you that, if I just go to the systems page, if I just zoom in, you can see the hydraulics here, 0 pressure on both systems, but almost full. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put the hydraulic pumps on, 1, 2, and we're going to see that it should go up to around 3,000 pounds per square inch. So a huge amount of hydraulic pressure. All the flight controls now are powered, you know, the flaps are ready to go and so on. Checking the doors. Then we've got the pressurization panel, checking to make sure that we've got 0 indicated. So in other words, there's 0 difference in pressure between outside the aircraft and inside the aircraft, and that it's all legible. Flight voice recorder, that's going to go on. That's an important one. Otherwise, Petter, you're not going to be able to make any videos. No. So it's important we get that. And that's just going to automatically start recording everything we're saying now, all before all of the briefings, all of the setup. So if there was any incident, they can listen to that black box effectively. You'll notice there's also an auto, and that means it will auto start after the first engine start. So if you just leave it in auto, when you start engine number 2 and it's running, it will automatically start recording what's going on. All right, this is the air conditioning panel. Again, we're just checking that everything's legible. It's very primitive. The trim air is basically a way of just tweaking the temperature in the various zones. So we've got the control cabin, which is the flight deck, the forward, which is the forward part of the aircraft in the cabin, the aft, and this is the supply ducts that go to those. And you've got the actual cabin itself, and then the air conditioning system. So you would just leave it where it is for the moment. This is the real primitive bit, isn't it, Petter?
This system is like the system you would get on an old Volkswagen Beetle. Like yeah. It is really, really primitive. It's literally like put a little bit warmer, put a little bit colder. There's no digital setting for temperature, nothing like that. The only thing that you can do if you want something to set to an exact temperature is turn the thing off. Yeah. If you turn it completely all of them off, then it will regulate to 18 and 20. What is it? 24.
24, yeah.
24. So 18 in the cockpit and 24.
Yeah.
The other. So apart from that, you have to sit and tweak. And what happens inevitably is that it's too cold in the back. So the cabin crew in the back complains, and then you put it up 2 millimeters to warm, and then they call back 2 minutes later saying it's roasting in the back, and then you keep fiddling with that throughout the flight.
Yeah, we say we teach, in the AUT, so flight deck in A, the forward cabin pointing to U and the aft cabin pointing to T. It's a great starting point, but yeah, we're gonna.
You can hear it yourself, like AUT.
Yeah, you know what it's like. We were in first flight of the day the other day. It was cold here in the UK. As soon as you get the air conditioning on with the APU, I already had turned them all the way to full cold, which might sound counterintuitive, but because all the sensors, temperature sensors in the aircraft are cold, the system goes, oh, it's freezing in the cabin, and just blasts roasting hot air into the cabin, super uncomfortably hot. So we kind of preempted that by turning them to full cold. And even then, the temperature in the supply was going up to like 50 degrees. And it took a while for it to kind of wake up and realize.
And on top of that, one of the problems is, of course, that the sensors get dirty down the back and they're not being clean, which is why you can't even trust what you're seeing. So that one is just, it's subpar.
Yeah, it's subpar. It is. But then coming down, this is the pressurization system now. So that was like the air conditioning, and this is kind of like the pressurization as such, in the sense that it enables us to control the air that's coming into the aircraft and the compressed air and where it's going. So the recirc fans, they leave in auto. They just recirculate a certain amount of air to reduce the load on the air conditioning packs themselves. And we're just now going to move the pack valves, which are what actually condition the air, from off to auto. And we leave this isolation valve, which is a bit like the cross feed valve on the fuel, where it separates the left and the right. We leave that open, and that will enable air to flow from one side to the other. Then we have the engine bleed switches, which basically bleed air out of the engine, the compressor stage of the engine, into the aircraft that we will now condition and then use in the cabin. So even though they're on, they'll actually be closed because they're pneumatically, electrically activated. So it will send a signal to open the valve, but they're pneumatically operated. So it needs pneumatic pressure to actually open it. And because there is none, they're closed. So that's fine. We leave them where we are. If it was cold or very hot, we can now put the APU, if it was running, we could put the APU bleed on, and that ducts air out of the APU to provide conditioned air to the cabin. But that's off at this point. Then we come down to the pressurization system. And this is where we would set in our flight altitude and our landing altitude at destination, which we get from our flight plan. And let's say we're climbing, whatever it might be for the flight plan, we would set it at, say, 34,000 feet. The landing altitude where we're going is to Dublin. Actually, I just changed the view so you can see it. 250 feet above sea level. And most importantly, we are checking that this, what we call the pressurization mode selector, is in auto. And that was the switch that caused the Helios accident, which was back in 2003, roughly, I think it was, where Petter was talking about, where it depressurized in flight, because this was in manual mode and the engineers had left the outflow valve in the back of the aircraft open, which means the aircraft couldn't pressurize. So as they climbed into thinner air, they weren't getting good enough air and everyone got incapacitated, and ultimately the aircraft crashed, unfortunately, when it ran out of fuel. Yep. So anything you want to add on that particular panel, Petter?
No, not really. It's just really, as with everything here, you have to pay attention when you make these switches. This is why, by the way, we go into so much detail, so you understand why we do each one of the switches.
Yeah, we've got lights down here. I mean, if it was nighttime, we put the logo light on, a bit of advertising, so it lights up the logo on the tail. If you're doing a walk around, we can put the wheel well lights on, so it's lit up in the wheel belly of the aircraft for the person walking around. Then we come down to, again, you see the flow now, we're coming down. This is what we call the mode control panel. And we're just going to now do a few minor things. We don't do much, but we turn the flight director. You see these little FD on and FD on. These are flight directors, and these are what going to guide us and the autopilot once we get airborne and enable us to change modes. And we generally put the pilot who's flying first is going to have the master switch on first. So let's just turn both of these off. So if Petter was in the left seat, Petter would come on here and you would turn this on, and you're looking for the green MA light to come on to tell you that the left side, the captain's instruments and systems are the master and the FO's is a slave. You see it doesn't come on. But if the FO was pilot flying for the sector, they would turn their one on first. That's now the master and the captain is the slave. So you turn them on in that order. We set the runway heading. Today it's runway 22. So that's a heading of 222 degrees at the moment. 25 degrees angle of bank would be set on here, which we can change. And we would set the first stop altitude for our expected departure plus 100 feet. So if we think that the stop altitude that we're going to initially level off for departure is 4,000 from the chart, we would put 4,100 initially. Why, Petter? Why? What's the logic there?
Because we haven't yet received our air traffic control clearance. And by putting into something, a clearance from air traffic control is always going to be uneven numbers. Like it's going to be 2,000 feet, 3,000 feet, 5,000 feet, so on. It's never going to be 5,100 feet.
Nope.
So by putting it to something that is conspicuous, it tells us that this is what we think we're going to get, but we haven't received the clearance yet. So it's a reminder for us that we need to get the air traffic control clearance still.
Yeah. So we kind of set it there, ready to go. Everything else, we might set any courses that we'll go into later on, but we wouldn't necessarily set them at this point. And now we continue the flow down. So we've got what we call our auto brake here. And we move this into the RTO, the rejected takeoff position. And as you can see, if I just do that again, it does a little self-test. So as I move that, I'm expecting the auto brake disarm light to come on for a few seconds and then go out as it does a self-test. And that will enable the automatic braking system to activate should we close the thrust levers during the takeoff roll and we're above, 88, not 80,
90 knots.
No, yeah, 88, 90 knots. And it will then automatically apply maximum braking for pretty brutal deceleration. So we arm that to give us maximum deceleration should we ever reject. Flaps, this is our flap indicator. Obviously, we make sure the flaps are up. These are both in auto. Reset. So what we're going to do here is we just move this to reset. What that does is reset any fuel that we used in the system from the previous flight. So that in the next flight, if we ever need to reference that, we can go, oh yeah, we burnt this much on this side, that much on the other side, and it might help us troubleshoot. So we just reset that system. Engine, so this is where we can change our lower DU on our multifunction display. We can either set the secondary engine parameters or the system is the hydraulics. We can have however we might need. For this stage, we can have this set up. Gears down, flaps are up, speed brakes down, stab trim cutout switches, which making sure these are in the normal position up. Start levers are cut off, which is a fuel. We're going to come into those later. We might have the parking brake off. We might have it on. We could be chocked, but we could potentially set that. Fire panel we've done. We could then maybe set some radio frequencies in here. So this is our communication panel where we talk to air traffic control, what we affectionately call box 1. And on the other side, we have box 2, what would you listen to on box 2, Petter?
So box 1 is for primary communication with air traffic control. Box 2 is for normally 1-to-1 decimal 5 when we're not using it for listening to weather, for example, getting the 80s and so on. So it's secondary communication and standby.
Yeah, good. So we might set any frequencies that we might need in there at that point. Weather radar, we basically just set the tilt to whatever we need. Now we generally set the tilt to 5 degrees for takeoff. Now this doesn't work in PMDG, but I would do it anyway. And what that will do is when we turn the radar on before we take off, it will tilt the weather radar up to about 5 degrees. And with the beam width that it has, it basically covers a swathe of sky that we're about to launch into that helps us detect thunderstorms or anything nasty that we don't want to fly into. So we've got that set up. Again, with the navigation radios, we might leave that until we get the chart and we know what we're setting. This is called our ACP, our audio control panel. If I just change the view, actually might be a little bit easier just to show you that. This enables us to select and listen to a number of different areas. So this is box 1, box 2. Maybe it's better to show you from here, actually. You've got the HF frequencies, flight intercom, which is how Petra and I would talk to each other on the intercom through our headphones. So you can press that down. Now, if this is lit, that's what we're transmitting on. But we can also listen to multiple channels at the same time. So we can listen to what we're transmitting on, but we can also listen to box 2, say on 1215, and I can listen to Petter. If you want to speak to the cabin crew, that's service. We press that, and we've got the PA. So we're just checking that those are set properly. This is for the ADF, which we don't need today. Transponder, they will give us a code for this. Briefly, Petter, what's that for?
So this is the little radio box that communicates with air traffic control, for example, give us secondary radar information, but also ADS-B. So all of the flight radar 24 applications and stuff gets its information from the transponder box. So this is every flight gets its own code, like Ben said. which we put in, and that code then helps air traffic control distinguish between all the different flights out there and what we're doing.
Correct. So when we get call for our clearance later on, which we're going to do in the coming days, they will give us a unique code that we would input in here, and we have a selector that enables us to transmit it in various ways. And at the moment, we're just making sure it's in standby. So generally, we'd have 2000 standby set in there. And lastly, we have our rudder and aileron trim, and we need to make sure that these are moving, these are working. So, Peter, what do you do here with yours? What are you looking for?
So with the rudder, I put my feet on the rudder pedals.
Yeah.
And then I move the rudder to the left and right, and I move it enough to actually feel that the rudder pedals are displacing, right? Yeah. So they're physically moving the rudder pedals for me. So I move it a little bit to the left, and I move it a little bit to the right, and I feel how the rudder is moving, and then I make sure that I go back to zero again.
Yeah.
The same when you do the aileron trim. Aileron trim is something that we very rarely use. Like the rudder trim, we would use sometimes a little bit, but aileron trim almost never. So you need to move the aileron trim, you need to push both buttons at the same time. And when you do, you look up on your yoke, and you can see how the little trim is moving. So as you're pushing the button, it will go to the right or to the left, and then you make sure that you go back again to the center once you have finished.
You can see it moving there, and that's it. And then we just make sure that it's zeroed, so that when we go flying, it's zero. And we would check it down. If I just go back to here, you're checking that the actual little indicator is pointing to 0. And you can see actually it's not, it's pointing to 1. So I'd have to come and bring it back to the left a little bit. And we're just checking the real other way. We're just checking that it works. That's gone too far. It stays. It's easier in real life.
as is so many things. I'm so happy that you are the one that's controlling the sim.
Yeah. But yeah, that you get the gist of what we're trying to do there. We're just making sure that everything is ready to go. There we go. We got it on 0. And now, ladies and gents, we'll be finished. The boarding's coming on. We can get the parking brake on maybe, because now they might start thinking about removing chocks. And now is the point we would actually now start deep diving into our flight management computer. We'd start entering the routes, doing takeoff performance, briefings. And that is what we're going to look forward to tomorrow. So tomorrow, we are going to pick up from where we left off. So if you were following along here in the sim, or you want to follow along tomorrow, have a go. If you've got your sim, have a go at doing what we've done. You can play this back, pause it, copy what we've done. And then if you're on stand tomorrow, with all of this data ready to go, we're going to then deep dive into the FMC and demystify a lot of what the FMC is, why we do certain things, the logic behind it. Look at an introduction to takeoff performance as well. Get some briefings done, how we brief, which is really useful for everyday life as well. We'll go into more why. Yeah. But then we're going to get a real insight into how we mitigate problems, anticipate issues, and be ready to get, when we press toga later on, that we're fully in the zone, fully aware of what may happen and what we're going to do if it does.
And once again, if you haven't signed up to this training event, there should be a link in the description of the video, or we are on Facebook as well if you look for us. And I've done some YouTube posts, some Mentour Pilot as well with the links. If you sign up there, you're going to get the workbook, which is what we're basing all of these lessons on. Yeah. So make sure that you've signed up to the course so that you know when the next one. And we're going to do this at the same time for the next 4 days.
Yeah, and the learning is going to keep going. It's going to transform. When you put yourself now in 4 days' time, what you know then is going to be, it will be radically different. So we've got a lot to look forward to. So yeah, if you're just joining the Facebook group or you're just registering, please say hello. It's an amazing, positive community in there. Do a brief introduction on who you are, where you're from. It's been really inspiring getting to see you and meet so many of you from all around the world. But on that note, ladies and gents, it's been an absolute privilege so far to start this, to finally get this going, get this journey underway. We're going to continue the learning tomorrow. Do keep in touch in the group. I am doing a live Q&A tomorrow at 2 p.m. in the Facebook group. So please do register for that. And then once we've done that, we'll be going live again tomorrow at the same time in the evening to continue the journey. But ladies and gents, absolute pleasure. Petter, absolute pleasure as always. And
great one.
Good night.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to this tomorrow as well.
And we'll see you all tomorrow, everyone. Have a good night. Take care now. All the best. Bye-bye.
Good night.